To our first item under the second part, which is we're going to have a economic development financing. It's probably really an informational session. We'll probably be taking a few questions also, but it's just we want to hear from a finance person on financial structurings. And William Fazioli from First Southwest Company, which is an investment banking firm, is here, and I think we'll have Andre do some further intro also.
Bill Fazioli. A few months ago, I had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Fazioli on the various financial mechanisms that are out there to finance economic development. Obviously, one of which has stirred a lot of conversation in Londonderry since it was introduced a couple of years ago. Although Londonderry's first TIF district was actually done back in the mid-'80s to fund the sewer expansion where Coca-Cola now sits. But given that discussion of the TIF districts, Mr. Fazioli's background is he has 20 years of municipal experience in New England and working on these types of projects, as well as in another life being a former city manager as well as a finance director for municipalities in Massachusetts. So based on that, we figure that with his relationship with Londonderry, I believe we've, I think, done, what, 2 bond issues? One so far, bond issues through Southwest Company, and but his knowledge with regard to tax increment financing would probably be a good, at least overview of what it can do and what it cannot do. And if anybody's interested in copies, I have copies up here of his presentation. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Andre, and
Thank
welcome.
you, Chairman, members of the board. Just to get an idea of what time expectations you are thinking, maybe 10 or 15 minutes is something that goes along.
That's usually, I think any presentation, 15 to 20 minutes is good.
Okay.
You start losing people
right, yeah.
beyond
So
that.
I just want to, I won't be going slide by slide, but you know, we'll kind of cover the high points.
Give me the nod when you want me to.
Right, yeah, usually the cue is next slide, please. But, and also ask questions during the presentation. Don't wait till the end. If there's something that I say that doesn't make sense or you don't quite understand my accent, please feel free. I didn't.
Okay, any questions, just raise your hand, I'll recognize you.
And I do have some information in the back of the presentation about myself and my company, but I won't be going through that during the presentation. That's just for your reference.
Okay.
So, but really the first slide kind of talks about what I want to discuss tonight is the what and whys of TIFs, sort of a conceptual overview nationally, and talk about some here that have been done in New Hampshire, some that are being contemplated in other parts of New England. Want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of tax increment financing, not spend a lot of time on that because you can spend a lot of time in the process. And
There's
I
a lot of detail of this stuff.
yeah,
sure.
we want to, you know, maybe think about some of the policy questions. I think the board is probably more interested right now through
probably,
some case studies.
Yeah. This board is basically not a policy-making board, so I mean, there's no
Sure.
decisions on our part, and
Okay.
you know, we would furnish input to the town council, and I see 2 of the town councilors here anyway.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Sorry,
Well,
Kathy.
there's a quorum. Okay.
You'll get
So,
even with me, I'm sure.
What I'll do is then I'll just, you know, through some case studies, talk about how some other communities dealt with some of these issues that perhaps
Yes,
Londonderry
this is only, I think, the beginning of
Sure.
discussion, and we really wanted the financial perspective
Okay,
of it.
great.
We've heard other perspectives, but we want to hear from a finance
Great.
person.
Yeah. As Andre said, my background is municipal finance, largely in Rhode Island, but in the last few years I've been doing some work in Massachusetts and New Hampshire as well, so, and a little bit in Connecticut. So basically, if we go to the next slide, just talk about what is tax increment financing, and I think you all have a general concept of what it is. It's a development tool that helps municipalities promote private investment within a certain area, mainly either an underutilized area or an area of blight. In the case studies that I'll be going through, we'll talk about some of the areas that were identified by other communities and why they fit into their master plans, why they wanted to develop them, because they were really underutilized sites, so there was some community need to put some a carrot out there to entice a private development. TIFs were largely started in 1952 in California. They were well ahead of the rest of us. They're very common in Texas, where my company's based out of Dallas. Illinois, the city of Chicago has over 100 TIF districts itself, just in the city of Chicago. Missouri, St. Louis has multiple TIF districts. They've been really the leading edge tax increment financer player in the last decade or so, and very common in Florida. Overall, there's 49 states that allow for some form of tax increment financing, even though they might call it a different name. It's still essentially the same tool, and there's been billions of dollars issued in TIF bonds over the last 25 years. In most states, it's what they call a limited tax obligation. Basically, when you issue bonds to pay for infrastructure improvements within a TIF zone, the taxes solely within that district support the debt. In most instances, in New Hampshire, it's not the case. In New Hampshire, it's a general obligation bond where you do get voter approval, and it's ideally you want just the revenues within the TIF district to pay for the bonds, to support the bonds, but ultimately, though, it is a general obligation of the issuing town. In most instances that I've seen in New Hampshire, they've issued TIFs. The general obligation has never been tapped into. It's the revenues from the TIF district and the development have been more than sufficient to pay for the bond issue. But that's just a nuance to New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, as Andre said, there's been several instances of TIF. The ones I have included in my case studies are in the city of Keene, New Hampshire, which did one back in the 90s. And recently, the city of Concord did one not too long ago for a corporate office park, which I'll talk about, sort of the financing plan behind that. And Durham, I believe, did a rather small TIF for a small industrial park within the last couple of years. The next slide talks about sort of the philosophy behind why issuing TIFs, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it. First and foremost, expand your tax base to promote job creation and really enhance the quality of the life of a community. It's really a strategic tool to leverage the desired form of private investment in a particular area. Because the public, the town, is stepping up and putting money on the table to entice a developer into a certain area, that gives you a huge amount of leverage to dictate what type of development you want in place there. That's sort of the carrot. The stick part is the development agreement that you put in place with your developer that makes them live up to certain benchmarks and safeguards. If they don't live up to their end of the bargain, you can hold them within some steep standards as far as if they fail to deliver. You have some recourse there to go after them in terms of financial recourse or surety bonds or performance bonds, things of that nature.
I feel like I have to be the devil's advocate here.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mary.
And I'm just wondering, isn't it misleading to say that you expand the tax base since all of the taxes that are generated are pay the bond and don't go to help?
Actually, in theory, that's true, but under New Hampshire law, you are allowed to use part of the increment that comes from the creation of a district to go outside the district. Not all of it has to remain within the district to pay for the bonds or the debt service on the bonds. In some states, all of the revenue that arises from the new development has to stay within that district. In New Hampshire, you're allowed to share the increment, which really makes it a more beneficial use. And in some other states, like Chicago and Illinois, in St. Louis, Missouri, their TIF districts are so successful, they're actually, bringing money back to the city's general fund in some cases. And ultimately, once the bond, say for instance that you had to use all of the increment to pay for bonded debt service for 10 or 15 years, or whatever the term of the bond is, once the bonds are paid off, then that money can revert back to the city or to the tax roll. But there are some other benefits. Obviously, there's the job creation, and there's certain public improvements that go along with the TIFs as well. You get new infrastructure, things of that nature. Sometimes you can fund public amenities through TIF zones as well, parks and improved water systems and so on. But that's a good point. But New Hampshire law does allow you to use some of the revenue outside the district. And basically, the real last point I wanted to talk about, and I know this comes up a lot, with TIFs, no existing revenue or taxes are used to support these projects. It's all the projected increment from the new development. In the instances I'll be talking about tonight, there is no existing money diverted from the general fund or from the town's budget to support these projects, at least not directly. The next slide, just again, I know it's hard to see from the audience, but just again, philosophically and conceptually, this is how a TIF district works. You have, represented in blue in the bottom, is the base value of the existing property before any improvements are made. All of that revenue stays, and that is set in